Hey everyone, it's Rajiv and welcome back to my channel Rajiv's Reviews. In this video, I'm going to be giving my book review of the new book released by Stephen King with a collection of his short stories called If It Bleeds. Before I get into each of these stories and my thoughts and opinions of each of them, I have to say something about Stephen King's short stories in general. One thing which I really appreciate, and I think one of the main reasons why I love picking up his short story books, is because of the different range of emotions that I feel when I'm reading each one of them. Similarly, even in this book, even though there is a common supernatural theme element on all the four stories, each story is written in such a different manner, where one is probably light-hearted and the other one is very emotional, and one is very creepy and kind of disturbing, and some of them just make you open up your mind to all the possibilities that you thought never existed before. And each story is written in such a nice and unique manner that even though you feel like you might have read it before, there is actually an element of surprise where you really cannot predict how the story is going to turn out. So having said that, let me get down to each of the stories. Like I said, there are mainly four novellas in this book, and my personal favorite amongst all of them was the title of the book, which is a separate story by itself, called If It Bleeds. It is a story about this woman named Holly Gibney, who you might have read in King's previous novels like The Outsider or the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. Anyway, she is this person who works in this detective agency called Finders Keepers. And one day she sees this news report about this reporter who is covering a bombing that happened in a middle grade school. And she also sees the found footage of the man who is reportedly responsible for attacking the school. She feels like something is not quite right. So once she starts studying the video, she starts to see that the TV news reporter who covered the news is actually resembling the guy who attacked the school. She starts to wonder if it is actually the same person, and then she gets into this mystery and tries to solve it as to whether her hunches could be true or not. So I haven't actually read The Outsider or the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, but after reading this book, I really want to pick those books up as well, because I really enjoyed reading this story a lot. The villain is very disturbing and very creepy, and you really do not know how they are going to react. I also love the main character of Holly and how down to earth and flawed she is, and is someone that you can actually root for and relate to. I think the main thing that stood out for me in this story and why I liked it so much was because of the plan that Holly actually comes up with to trap the villain, and how she confronts him face to face, which is not something which I would have expected. Another thing which I always like reading in King's novels is the troubled relationship that the character have with their parents. Again, in this story, I really love the different emotions that Holly goes through with her mother and her father, and her character kind of reminded me of Franny from The Stand, which this was my favorite story in the whole book, and I really am tempted to pick up the other books to read more about Holly. My next favorite novella in this book is called Rat. The story focuses around Drew, who is this writer who is suffering from writer's block, and he mainly faces this problem where he has a lot of ideas and he's able to start his stories very well, but in the middle he kind of get confused as to what to write, and he always gets stuck and pushes his stories to the side and kind of has a mental breakdown. One day while he is walking outside, he suddenly gets a brilliant idea for his new novel, so he decides to take a break from his wife and kids and drive to this secluded cabin in the woods where he can write his story in 2 to 3 weeks and have a bestseller published. But once he enters the cabin, strange things start to happen where he starts to fall sick, and also the weather conditions outside are really bad, and he feels that he might be trapped in the cabin for a few days. Just when he thinks that he is losing his sanity, he actually saves a rat, and the rat starts talking to him, and they come to a deal as to how they can save each other. I feel like the author has repeated some of his earlier novels in this story, where I found a lot of similarities to His works like Secret Window, Secret Garden, From Four Past Midnight, or even The Shining. It had those classic moments where it has this secluded man in the middle of nowhere and he slowly starts to lose his sanity as to what is real and what is imaginary. I really enjoyed reading the story because at the end you really don't know whether whatever happened to him was actually real or was imaginary or was just coincidental. So it's always fun to read a story which is kind of left open ended but done in a nice manner. My third favorite story is Mr. Harrigan's Phone, which is this cute, creepy little tale which I also enjoy reading a lot. It focuses around this boy named Craig who has a talent for reading and reciting out the stories that he reads very nicely. He soon catches the attention of Mr. Harrigan, who is this old rich man who lives alone in the town. So he gives a part-time job to Craig to come over to his house every day to read stories to him. Craig starts to read for Mr. Harrigan for many years and develops a friendly bond with him, and one day he decides to gift him an iPhone. Mr. Harrigan is amazed by the features that the phone has and the amount of information that he is able to get, but unfortunately he shortly dies afterwards. At his funeral, Craig plants the iPhone back in Mr. Harrigan before he is buried. But something really strange happens where Craig starts to feel that he can still communicate with Mr. Harrigan from beyond the grave whenever he calls him on his phone. I think the main reason I really liked the story was the relationship between Mr. Harrigan and Craig. It wasn't written in any creepy way and it was very nice and simple. And I also found some of the things that Mr. Harrigan said very interesting, like how such technology can be man's greatest accomplishment but can also lead to his downfall as well. Even though the story had a bit of supernatural tone to it, it was not at all creepy and it was more sentimental and emotional and very bittersweet. And at the end, I thought this was a very strange but very nicely written story in its own way. Lastly, the least favorite story of all the four, in my opinion, is The Life of Chuck. This is a very bizarre story and it's very difficult to even explain it. So the only thing that I'm going to say is it talks about this man named Charles Krenz who suddenly starts appearing in all the billboards and all the advertisements in the radio and in television, congratulating him for 39 years of his service at work. He's just an average man and no one really knows who he is, and everyone starts to wonder why he is appearing everywhere. And the three-act story mainly revolves around him in some manner and how this particular incident affects everyone. The one thing which I should really say about this story is how unique it was in the way the author has written it, and it's unlike anything that I have read before and unlike anything which I will possibly read as well in the near future. I can somehow imagine the reasoning behind why the author would have written it in this manner, and it's very interesting actually, but at the end, after reading it, I just felt like it was very bizarre and it was too much for me to comprehend, and I really could not connect to the characters because it's a very short story, and just when you feel like you are getting to know the characters, you move on to the next part of the story, which I thought was very rushed and I really could not get invested in. In fact, I feel like if this was written as an actual novel instead of a novella and with more details given to the characters, I would have probably enjoyed this a lot. I love the overall theme of it, of how we are all connected to each other in some way and how our mind is so vast where we have infinite possibilities of communicating with each other. But at the end, the story was too odd for my taste and I just could not enjoy it as much as the others. But overall, I really enjoyed reading this collection of novellas by the author, and I would give this book a rating of 4 out of 5 stars. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please do like, share, and subscribe, and please do click on the bell notifications icon to get notifications on whenever I post something new. Thank you for watching, and until next time, bye!